You'll never amount to anything in this company. These were the words James heard day after day from his racist boss, Mr. Johnson. Little did Mr. Johnson know he was speaking to the son of the company's CEO, and his career was hanging by a thread. In the next few minutes, you'll witness a story that will leave you speechless. As we unravel the events leading up to a shocking revelation, prepare yourself for an unexpected turn of events that no one could have seen coming. As we reflect on this real-life story, subscribe, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell for more daily stories that need to be heard. Hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. James's heart sank as he pulled into the company parking lot. Mr. Johnson's sleek black sedan already occupied its usual spot, signaling another challenging day ahead. James took a deep breath, straightened his tie, and stepped out of his car, determined to face whatever awaited him. As he walked through the office, James couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between his own cubicle and the spacious corner offices. Despite his qualifications and years of experience, he remained in entry-level purgatory. Settling into his desk, James pulled up the company's latest financial reports, eager to dive into the data and prove his worth. But before he could even open the first spreadsheet, Mr. Johnson's booming voice echoed across the room. "James, I need you to handle some tasks for me." James felt his jaw clench, but he forced a polite smile. "Of course, Mr. Johnson. I'll get right on it." As James carried out his assigned duties, he couldn't help but wonder about his future at the company. The CEO's son was reduced to menial tasks while his ideas gathered dust in his mind. But James had made a promise to himself. He would succeed on his own merits, not his family connections. Hours passed and James found himself completing yet another mundane task. His coworker Sarah walked in and gasped, "James, you've done an amazing job. I can't believe how thorough you are." Before James could respond, Mr. Johnson appeared in the doorway, a smug smile on his face. "Well, of course he did. I personally oversaw the process. Attention to detail is key in this company." James felt his blood boil. He opened his mouth, ready to finally confront Mr. Johnson about his treatment. But as he looked at his boss's smug face, he hesitated. Was it worth risking his job, his chance to prove himself? At that moment, James made a decision. He would let his actions speak louder than words. As the workday came to a close, James gathered his things, his mind already racing with ideas for tomorrow's projects. His phone buzzed with a text from his father. "How are things going at work, son? Are you making waves yet?" James stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the reply button. After a moment, he typed out a simple response. "Everything's fine, Dad. I'm learning a lot." Little did James know, his chance to truly make waves was just around the corner. A high-stakes project was about to shake up the company, and James would find himself at the center of it all. But for now, he walked out of the office, head held high, ready to face another day of proving his worth in a world that seemed determined to hold him back. James stood on the brink of a career-defining moment, unaware that an unexpected opportunity was about to test his skills and character like never before. The office buzzed with excitement as Mr. Johnson, chest puffed with self-importance, strode in to announce a groundbreaking project. "Listen up, everyone," he boomed, his eyes deliberately skipping over James. "We've just landed a project that could transform our entire industry." Eager to contribute, James raised his hand, but Mr. Johnson pointedly ignored him, assigning tasks to everyone else. Undeterred, James lingered by the water cooler, catching snippets of conversation about the project's magnitude. His eyes widened as he realized what was at stake: a chance to overhaul the company's outdated systems and potentially double its market share. As the office emptied and the lights dimmed that night, James made a decision that would change everything. He pulled out his laptop and began working on the project in secret. Night after night, he pored over data, crafted proposals, and developed innovative solutions that could propel the company into a new era. The gentle hum of the air conditioning and the soft glow of his computer screen became James's constant companions. He lost track of time, fueled by determination and the burning desire to prove his worth. But his efforts wouldn't go unnoticed for long. One fateful evening, Just as James was putting the finishing touches on his proposal, the office door slammed open. Mr. Johnson's imposing figure loomed in the doorway, his face contorted with rage. "What do you think you're doing?" he bellowed, striding towards James's desk. "This is way above your pay grade. You're overstepping, and I won't stand for it." James felt his heart racing as Mr. Johnson's tirade continued. "If I catch you working on this project again, you're fired. Do you understand me?" The threat hung heavy in the air, leaving James with an impossible choice. Should he submit his work anonymously and risk discovery, or let all his hard work go to waste? As the first rays of sunlight began to peek through the office windows, James made his decision. With trembling hands, he slipped his unsigned proposal into the project folder. He knew the risks, but he couldn't bear to see his ideas die in the shadows of discrimination. The next morning, James arrived at work, his stomach in knots. As he approached the conference room, he heard Mr. Johnson's voice, uncharacteristically filled with excitement. "I don't know who came up with these ideas," he was saying, "but they're brilliant. This could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for." James felt a mix of pride and frustration wash over him. His work was being praised, but he couldn't claim it as his own. As he took his seat, he couldn't help but wonder, would his brilliance ever be truly recognized? Or would he forever remain in the shadows, his potential stifled by prejudice? Little did James know, his moment of truth was fast approaching. The event set in motion by his anonymous submission would soon collide with an unexpected visit, bringing his hidden talents into the spotlight in a way no one could have anticipated. The office buzzed with tension as news of the CEO's surprise visit spread like wildfire. James's heart raced, knowing his father, Mr. Green, was moments away from walking through those doors. The moment of truth was approaching faster than he could have ever anticipated. As Mr. Green entered the room, James watched from his cubicle, a mix of emotions swirling in his chest. Mr. Johnson, oblivious to the true identity of his star employee, began presenting the high-stakes project. With each slide, each innovative idea, James felt a knot tightening in his stomach. These were his concepts, his hard work, being presented as someone else's brilliance. Mr. Green leaned forward, his interest piqued. "This is truly exceptional work," he said, his gaze sweeping the room. "I'd like to know who came up with these key concepts. They deserve recognition." The tension in the room thickened as all eyes turned to Mr. Johnson, who suddenly looked like a deer caught in headlights. James felt his palms grow sweaty. Should he speak up, reveal his involvement, and risk everything he'd worked for? His mind raced, weighing the consequences. On one hand, he could finally prove his worth and expose Mr. Johnson's deceit. On the other, he might be accused of using his family connections, destroying the very thing he'd been fighting against. As James opened his mouth, teetering on the edge of a life-changing decision, fate intervened. Sarah, his co-worker, who had witnessed his dedication, couldn't contain herself any longer. "It was James," she blurted out, her voice cutting through the silence. "He's been working on this project in secret for weeks. I saw him staying late every night, pouring his heart and soul into it." The room fell silent, a collective gasp hanging in the air. All eyes turned to James, including his father's, wide with shock and a hint of something else. Was it pride? James met his father's gaze, a lifetime of unspoken words passing between them in that single moment. Mr. Johnson's face drained of color as he realized the gravity of his actions. He had not only stolen credit for someone else's work, but had been discriminating against the CEO's son all along. The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. As James stood there, heart pounding, he knew that everything was about to change. The carefully constructed facade he had built was crumbling around him, but in its place, a new reality was taking shape. One where his true talents could finally shine, free from the shadows of prejudice and discrimination. Little did anyone know this revelation was just the beginning. The events set in motion by this unexpected visit would ripple through the company, challenging long-held biases and paving the way for a new era of equality and recognition based on merit alone. As James's revelation echoed through the room, Mr. Green's eyes burned with an intensity that made everyone shudder. The CEO turned to Mr. Johnson, his voice low and controlled. "Explain yourself, Mr. Johnson, now." Mr. Johnson's confidence crumbled. "I didn't know he was your son, sir. His work needed polishing. I was only trying to protect the company's interests." James, emboldened by support, finally spoke up. He detailed the discrimination he had faced, from menial tasks to stolen ideas. As he spoke, other voices joined in, sharing their own experiences of unfair treatment. Sarah stepped forward. "Many of us have faced similar treatment, Mr. Green. We were afraid to speak up, fearing for our jobs." Mr. Green listened, his disappointment in Mr. Johnson evident. The problem ran deeper than he could have imagined. Mr. Johnson attempted to backpedal, but Mr. Green raised a hand, silencing the room. "What I've heard today is deeply disturbing and goes against everything this company stands for. Discrimination of any kind is unacceptable." He turned to face the entire room. "I want to thank those who dared to speak up. Starting tomorrow, we will implement new company-wide policies to combat discrimination and promote equality." As the meeting ended, James and his father shared a moment of unspoken understanding. Mr. Green placed a hand on his son's shoulder, a gesture that spoke volumes about his pride and regret. This confrontation marked the beginning of a new era at the company, one where equality and recognition based on merit would become the norm. Mr. Green swiftly implemented new policies across the company, creating a workplace where everyone felt valued and heard. James, now recognized for his brilliance, found himself in a corner office, his ideas finally given the platform they deserved. The office buzzed with new energy as colleagues who had once been afraid to speak up now shared their thoughts freely. James looked around, witnessing the transformation taking place. He saw potential unleashed, ideas flowing, and a sense of possibility that hadn't existed before. It was more than just his triumph. It was a victory for everyone who had ever felt silenced or overlooked. As he settled into his new role, James made a silent vow to always be a voice for those who couldn't speak for themselves. He knew there were others out there, their potential stifled by fear and discrimination. The thought weighed heavily on his mind, driving him to work even harder for positive change. Our story may be coming to a close, but the journey towards a more inclusive world continues. The power to make a difference lies in your hands. What will you do to create change in your own corner of the world? Join our community of people who believe in justice, empathy, and powerful storytelling. By subscribing, you're not just watching, you're part of a movement that values real stories and change. Add us to your daily routine and make every story count. Subscribe and join us each day for stories that make an impact.